Thank you, Justice Goldstone. Thank you, Ambassador Gold. We are running a little behind, but we want to take questions and comments, but very short, succinct questions that will allow our speakers to continue the conversation. I'm sure there are a number of things Justice Goldstone would like to say in response, and perhaps Ambassador Gold as well, but let's try to do it in the context of some succinct questions. There will be a couple of ground rules with this. First, I'm going to give priority, as I said earlier, to Brandeis students and faculty. Please identify yourselves clearly, say your class or your department of affiliation as well as your name. Keep your comments and questions quite brief so we can hear more from the speakers themselves. And I'm going to take several questions at once so that we can get a few different ideas out on the table and our speakers can then respond seriatim. There are students with handheld microphones, and when I call on you, if you can make your way to the aisle nearest where they are, and that way you'll be able to use the microphone there. I'm going to throw out an initial question and then take three from the audience and then let the speakers respond. One thing we haven't heard so much about, Justice Goldstone, are the specific 36 incidents that your mission investigated. And along the line in our discussion tonight, it might be useful for you to give the audience here a sense of the one or two of those 36 specific incidents that you feel make the most compelling case for the overall conclusions of your report, and why you think those specific incidents lead in that direction. And Ambassador Gold may want to use that as an opportunity to talk about what he considers some of the weaknesses of the methodology of the report. Okay, if I can get some hands here. Can I get a microphone up towards the front here? In the third row there. I'm going to call on, is there a student towards the back on the right there? And in right by the aisle there. Yeah, come a little closer. Right here, yeah, okay. So let's take those three questions first. You move your way to the aisle and ask your questions briefly. I will reserve the right to intervene if you're going on for too long, because we really want to get to hearing the speakers.
Thank you. My question is for Ambassador Gold. Sorry about that. I'm Jeremy Scherer. I'm a senior and I'm a politics and Islamic and Middle Eastern studies student. My question is, given what you say and that this report was in fact so terrible and so flawed, why has the Israeli government refused to launch an internal investigation on this issue? Would that not be the best way to combat a report that is so flawed, by presenting what the Israeli government clearly believes is the truth, as the government is so incredibly opposed to these ideas?
Thank you. If I can ask that we not make this into a competition about who can generate the most applause for questions, but let's get the questions out and then let the speakers respond.
The only thing on top of that is asking if Israelis themselves and its supporters of Israel worldwide do not deserve to know the truth about what happened in Gaza.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Mandy Paust. I'm a student at the Heller School for Social Policy, a grad student and management in the Sustainable International Development Program. And mine is also for Ambassador Gold. I would ask you to, if you could please address a little bit what the report described as disproportionate response by Israel toward Gaza, and specifically, if you could, what I noticed in that you draw a lot of comparisons, but to really look at the situation on its own would be great. Thank you.
One more.
Hi, my name is Sarah Geller. I'm a freshman, and I plan to study international relations and Islamic and Middle Eastern studies. My question is directed to Judge Goldstone. In the 2004 Sese case in the United Nations created special court of Sierra Leone, Justice Robertson was one of the 5 judges assigned to the case originally. However, when his lack of impartiality was revealed, he was disqualified. So in regards to this report, How can this report be considered fair and unbiased when Professor Christine Chinkin of the London School of Economics stated in an article her judgment that Israel committed war crimes and signed the letter that showed how close-minded she was, and even with all that and being brought to the committee's attention, she was not removed from the investigation. During the mission, you did promise the investigation would be both impartial and objective. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Goldstone, you want to start? The last question asked about Professor Chinkin and about why she had not been disqualified.
Well, if I first might respond to Dr. Terrace's question of just a couple of incidents that drove us to the conclusion that certainly in some instances civilians were intentionally attacked. We chose 36 incidents, and we chose the 36 incidents very carefully, and there, let me say, is absolutely no truth in the fabricated allegation that came out that we were given these incidents by Hamas. We chose the incidents. Nobody gave them or suggested them to us. That would hardly have been completely unacceptable to me and the other members of the group. But the one attack that certainly affected me was an attack on a mosque in Gaza City, a 3-year-old mosque, during a service. There were over 300 people attending the combined morning and evening service. They were combined because of the war, and they were attacked by a missile fired presumably well, not presumably, were fired from IDF ground forces. The missile came through the front door of the mosque, killed some 21 people and injured many more. There was no question at all of any secondary explosions, which indicated that there was no question of ammunition being kept there. But even if it was, there is no basis in law that you can, assuming in favor of the attackers that there was ammunition being stored there. You don't mortar shell it during a service. You do it at night if you want to bomb that mosque for any reason. And that hasn't been explained at all. It's that sort of incident that screams out, that cries out for investigation by an open, credible investigation in Israel. And why shouldn't they do that? The other example was the bombing of and complete demolition of schools. In particular, the one I couldn't understand, and I went to see it, was the complete demolition of the American school in Gaza City. And I still would love to know why the Israeli Defense Force or the Israeli government chose the American school. It was the center of anti-Hamas activity. Hamas hated the American school. It didn't teach Sharia law, it had an American curriculum. Why was that school demolished? No explanation. The call screams out for investigation. And other schools. The UNRWA compound attacked with white phosphorus. The UNRWA compound attacked with white phosphorus containing some 120,000 litres of gas. Had that exploded, and it was a miracle it didn't, there would have been a conflagration in the middle of Gaza City. Again, and let me say that white phosphorus was landing after many phone calls by the UN personnel to the Israeli Defense Force because they had direct lines of communication. Again, screams for investigation. The infrastructure. Ambassador Gold, with respect, has been very silent. There's been not a word from Israel explaining why the whole food industrial infrastructure of the Gaza Strip was destroyed. If that isn't collective punishment, what is? Again, that screams out for investigation. The Israeli leaders need to be called to account to explain why the ordinary people of Gaza, the women, the children, and men, are being put in a position of unemployment, of penury, of misery. And if that isn't collective punishment, again, what is? The last question put to me was about Professor Chinkin, and I've explained the position on many occasions. Professor Chinkin, at the end of the first week, when many people, it was no secret what was happening in Gaza, Al Jazeera was there filming it. Anybody, and we in South Africa get Al Jazeera, English, and we saw the destruction in Gaza City. She signed a letter together with other leading international lawyers in the United Kingdom, in which she said that this was aggression. And it was a technical issue. The International Court of Justice held that an occupying power cannot act in self-defense. The consequence would be it would be a police action. And this is one of the issues that we saw no point in going into, because whether Israel is an occupation or isn't an occupation, it was entitled fully by international humanitarian law, international human rights law, to take either military action or police action to stop what is clearly the most serious criminal conduct. And that was the statement Professor Chinkin made, and she added, not she, the letter added, and this Ambassador Girl didn't mention, the letter added that Hamas had committed war crimes in sending rockets and mortars into Israel. It wasn't a judicial investigation, as the Sierra Leone tribunal was. Judge Robertson, an English judge, had written in a recent book he had written, condemned one of the sides in the Sierra Leone war, and he was forced by his colleagues to recuse themselves. He couldn't, as a judge, sit in that position. And as I said at the time, if our fact-finding mission was even a quasi-judicial, let alone a judicial inquiry, I think Professor Chinkin would have had no option but to recuse herself. The issues we were looking at was how military force was used. And that was an issue on which she didn't commit herself at all. And that was the reason that she and we agreed, felt that she could continue to sit on the mission.
Let me tell you something about working. Let me tell you something about how the Israeli military justice system works, because it's part of the civilian justice system. In many countries, for example, if a divisional commander doesn't want his division investigated, he's the final arbiter of that question. In the Israeli system, we have a supreme military legal figure called the Military Advocate General. And he can initiate an investigation of any soldier, of any event, of any crime that's alleged, if he wants to. But let's say he doesn't fulfill his responsibility. We have civilian oversight of our military. And if a divisional commander doesn't want it, if the Military Advocate General doesn't want to investigate something, our Attorney General can initiate an investigation of any Israeli soldier, of any Israeli action. And let's say our Attorney General fails to do his job. Well, in our system of law, the Israeli Supreme Court can step in and actively initiate any investigation of this type, of these types of events. I personally have full confidence in the Israeli legal system to get to the bottom of the Gaza war. Now, of the 36 incidents that are mentioned in the report, there are 12 that the Israeli army never heard of. And those 12 are being investigated as we speak today. I trust that Israel can investigate itself. I trust that the Israeli legal system, its Supreme Court, its Attorney General, and the Military Advocate General know how to get to the bottom of these issues and can set them in the right framework and present the truth of what is going on. And therefore, I don't believe that we need to create a new special investigation because of the charges that are made against the State of Israel in this report, many of which I have my serious doubts about. Now let me just mention, because Justice Goldstone mentioned the alleged attack on the Ibrahim al-Makadma Mosque, where Palestinians had been praying. The Israeli position has been that that mosque was not attacked by Israel. Now the question we have to face, and this is the challenge of the mission, it's the challenge of Israelis investigating this matter, is reconstructing a reality that is no longer with us. Trying to understand what happened at a specific event months after it occurred. An explanation is given by the mission that there was an Israeli attack. But do we know that perhaps munitions exploded in the mosque itself? Do we know who were the figures who were operating in the mosques? On the websites of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other organizations, there are indications of who were the people in the mosque who were killed. And I am not trying to figure out and justify any military operation that is illegal or over which there's a black flag, as we say in the state of Israel. But I believe there are other possible outcomes that could have been investigated on the basis of information that's publicly available, mostly in Arabic, on websites, that could give us a clue as to what transpired in that mosque. But I'm telling you this, Israel did not attack that mosque. On the issue of a disproportionate use of force, I would suggest that Justice Goldstone explained to you the legal doctrine. It is much more complicated. It is not just if somebody throws a Qassam rocket at you, you throw a Qassam rocket back at him of the exact weight and the exact size. It's a whole legal doctrine that has to be fully understood and explained, and I hope you as students at Brandeis will study it.
Well, can I just respond to two issues? Firstly, Israel's legal system. Ambassador Gold is conflating Israel's outstanding civil regular legal system in its Supreme Court with military justice. What's happening is that the investigations to date, and it's now, 9 months since the end of Operation QandA, the military is investigating itself behind closed doors. That's not a legal system. That's not a judicial system. It's not justice at all. And what's the result been in 9 months after the allegations made not only by our report, allegations were made by Israeli, by Palestinian, by international organizations for the last 10 months since Operation QandA began. What's been the result? One conviction for the theft of a credit card. I mean, that's demeaning of the victims in Gaza. Concerned, we found the remnants of the Israeli ammunition and tungsten squares that were pulled out of the wall in my presence. And you know, really with respect to Ambassador Gold saying Israel didn't do it, and then justifying it, reminds me of the old story, apocryphal story, of the man charged with rape. He said, I didn't do it, I wasn't there. The alternative defense is she consented. Well, this is the sort of defense that's being made.
Bring three more questions into the mix. One there. One in the front here. And one in the middle there. Yeah, right there.
My name is Rebecca Schlengel. I'm a senior in independent study in mass media and communications. And my question is for Justice Goldstone. I believe that you mentioned twice that you do not have access to any officials from the Israeli Defense Force, or any residents from southern Israel, or any officials from the Israeli government. But yet you stated that the report is unbiased. Would it not having access to the information, even if Israel was the one to deny you the access, would it not having that information lead to a biased report? Given your reputation, why did you choose to go forward with a report that could obviously not come out unbiased?
In front.
So my name is Lisa Hanania. I'm a Palestinian. I'm a junior in international and global studies. And I'm just disappointed that the Palestinian perspective is not presented in this.
This is a place for questions. That's not a question, that's a statement.
I'm going to ask, okay.
I want questions,
Justice
not
Goldstone, I want
statements.
to ask you, if you may, how do you feel as a UN representative, as somebody who's supposed to represent the balance between, somewhat of a balance between Palestinians and Israelis, and to try to find the truth? How do you feel I feel disrespected in your name. So how do you feel with the fact that there is no Palestinian perspective on this debate, or just speaking on your own? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, but that's actually a question that should be answered by the organizers of the debate, not the people who were invited to it.
Hi, my name is Liza Barrett. I am a junior here and a major in politics. And my question is for Justice Goldstone. In the speech and mainly in the report, you've talked mainly about actions during Operation Cast Lead. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the conditions in Gaza that have been a fact before the invasion and still exist, and how that affects life in Gaza, apart from just military actions.
I think the three questions were directed primarily at me. As far as getting involved in a bias situation, obviously I was saddened that we didn't get the cooperation of Israel, as I said. The sort of information that we were shown by Ambassador Gold should have been shown to us during the investigation. Why afterwards? It really is difficult to understand. And if we didn't get it officially from the Israeli government, surely we should have been allowed to come in to get it in any event. We had to go to the ridiculous lengths of the UN having to bring at its expense citizens of a democratic state to give us evidence in Geneva. We had to meet with other Israelis in Amman, Jordan. It was very difficult to do it, but we did what we could to ensure that we looked at both sides, and that's why we went to great lengths to investigate and demonstrate the terror effects of the rockets and mortars on southern Israel and Sderot in particular. I take your point about the organisers being responsible. Let me say, because I think I should put it on record, that I would have liked to have seen a representative of the Palestinian people also. As far as the conditions in Gaza is concerned, I must say that my visit to Gaza turned out very differently from what I'd anticipated. I was quite frankly, and I make and I'm not ashamed to say it, I was very nervous a Jew going to Gaza controlled by Hamas, especially when the first reaction to my appointment with Hamas was to reject my leading it because I was Jewish. And my wife sitting here will remember 3 nights before I woke up in the night after a terrible nightmare with sweat on my brow because I had a vivid dream that I'd been kidnapped by Hamas, and people in Israel were rejoicing. That was the nightmare, but it was based on real fear. I was, I'm happy to say, met warmly by ordinary Palestinians. And what struck me in particular was how similar the people of Gaza are to the people of Israel. The atmosphere, the warmth, the food, everything that goes on. And that made me feel even more sad at what has happened. At the ordinary people who are suffering the effect of the blockade, the siege of Gaza, is having huge effects. People are reliant on humanitarian aid. And you know what that does to your dignity? That you can't earn your own living, you can't buy your own food, but because of the political policy foisted on Gaza, People are forced to get what they can as handouts, and they never know from day to day what's going to be allowed in, to Gaza. The other thing that struck me was a huge physical damage. You can't drive a block in Gaza City without seeing destroyed homes, destroyed government buildings, the Parliament building, the Department of Education, the central prison, which allowed criminals to escape. And that was very hard to see, and also to realize that no rebuilding has begun at all because of the blockade not allowing any building materials at all into Gaza. And we saw thousands of people living in makeshift tents that had to be erected by the United Nations because people can't rebuild their homes.
I think this gets to the heart of the problem with the report. There's no question there was enormous damage in Gaza as a result of the war. No one will deny that. But here is one of the mysteries that I didn't understand. Why doesn't Hamas appear as a responsible party for what happened? Because again, if you read the report, just look at the summary as well as the body of the report. It relates to armed groups. Who are these armed groups? Which armed groups? The report almost grants a legitimacy to Hamas because Hamas is not criticized for the policy that led to the disaster on the Palestinians. By the way, if you invited Palestinians, you'd have to make a choice who to invite. A representative of Hamas or a representative of the Palestinian Authority, Fatah. And therefore, when you witness the destruction that occurred in Gaza, you have to ask the fundamental question. Who booby-trapped the buildings in Gaza? Who launched an 8-year war against the state of Israel? Who put explosives and dug tunnels under civilian homes? And what was the responsibility of, yes, the Hamas political leadership, which seems to get off the hook, which sat in the parliament? What is their responsibility for guiding and directing this war? This war would never have happened if rockets weren't fired at the state of Israel. Remember, Israel withdrew from Gaza in September 2005. It had no desire to go back there. And I know we hear all the time about the blockade of Gaza, but through the Egyptian border, there are huge amounts of goods and services running between Egypt and Gaza. And if that area should be opened more, let the Egyptians open it. It's up to them. It's their border. But to put the responsibility on Israel, because of the closure in Gaza, why should Israel open up its borders to Gaza when it's being pelted by rockets every other day? So again, the report would have real credibility if it treated Israel fairly, if it didn't make the judgments it made on the basis of evidence that's very questionable, and if it finally pinned the blame on the entity that is responsible for creating this crisis and creating tragedy for the Palestinian people, and that's the leadership of Hamas.
At the risk of keeping you from your dinner, it's a very unusual opportunity, so I'm going to take one final round of questions before we conclude. One in the front row here. On the side section, in the middle there, on the aisle over here.
First of all, my name is Ofir Abu. I'm an Israeli Jew who is very concerned about the fate of his country. And I'm also a PhD student here in QandA in the politics department. as someone who wants to learn from this report, I have a question for you, Justice Goldstone. And thank you both for coming out, first of all. There seems to be, Justice Goldstone, there seem to be two disagreements between the mission and Israel. First of all, it's about the rules of war and what to do when a country faces a terrorist threat. And the second disagreement is regarding the definition of Hamas. What is Hamas? Is it an insurgency? Is it a terrorist organization? Is it, as you call it, Gaza authorities? I don't know.
You have to go straight to the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how would you, and in terms of that, I want to ask you, how would you suggest for states from now on to respond to terrorist threats, and how would you suggest to Israel to respond or to engage with Hamas? One question for
I'm sorry, we
both.
got to stop it there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sherelle, guys. I'm a sophomore at Brandeis. I'm majoring in politics and Islamic Middle Eastern studies. My question is for Justice Goldstone. You speak about these instances that scream for investigation in Gaza, but what about the Israelis that suffered for 8 years in Sderot, in Gush Katif, in Ashkelon, in Israel? What about those people? They have been suffering from collective punishment by Hamas, and this collective punishment is just because they're Jewish and because they live in Israel. And I want to know, where was your voice then, and where was the investigation then? That's what I want to know, because it's too late now for investigation about Hamas. It should have been done years ago.
And the third question?
My name is Avi Snyder. I'm a freshman here at Brandeis. I have no major yet. I really have questions for both of you, but I take it I can only ask one. So then my question is for Justice Goldstone. You mentioned in your speech how you certainly acknowledge that Israel had the right to defend itself against rocket attacks on its civilian population, and you said that in your report you certainly make no claim that Israel didn't have this right. I'm curious, because you accuse Israel of engaging in a disproportionate response, what, in your judgment, would have constituted a proportionate response to the rocket attacks against Sderot and Ashkelon? And I understand you're not a military strategist, but I just feel like it's important to know if what Israel did was disproportionate, what could have been done.
Well, question one about, the first question had two questions. Firstly, about the rules of war. And incidentally, proportionality has got nothing to do with comparing what one side uses and the other side uses. It's got nothing to do with proportionality. Is what's proportionate in respect of the military advantage sought and the number of innocent civilians killed. I'll give you a simple example. If there's an ammunition factory in the middle of Boston, and a 1,000-pound bomb can take out the ammunition factory, which is a military target, and kill 100 civilians, or a 2,000 bomb can do the same job on the military factory and kill 5,000 civilians. The first is proportionate, not a war crime. The second is disproportionate, a war crime. That's what it's about, not comparing what rockets with rockets. What is Hamas? Hamas is for good or ill, the government of Gaza. It controls the whole of the Gaza Strip. It controls the civil police force. It controls the taxes. It's got judges who condemn people and, unfortunately, in my view, execute people. They've got capital punishment in the Gaza Strip. It's a government. At the same time, it's got a military wing, the Qassam brigades, that sends rockets and has been sending rockets by the thousands into Israel. We got a completely unsatisfactory response from Hamas. You know, at the end of our inquiry, we sent a questionnaire to Israel, to Hamas, and to the Palestinian Authority, asking sometimes embarrassing questions. Israel ignored our questionnaire completely. The other two didn't. We asked Hamas where the rockets were fired from. The answer from Hamas, we don't know, that's the military wing. We asked Hamas to tell us about Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier who had been abducted more than 3 years ago. We asked about his mental and physical condition. Answer, don't ask us, that's the military wing. So they very shrewdly adopt this divorce where the one hand doesn't know what the other hand of the same body is doing. It's a very difficult, amorphous situation, governing on the one hand, but using terrorist tactics against Israel on the other. How you deal with that, it seems to me, from a political point of view, would make a very good semester paper in the politics department. Collective punishment of the people of state. Of course. And the report deals with it. I beg you to read chapter 24 of the report, where we deal in some detail with the effect of the people of southern Israel of the mortar and rocket attacks. Disproportionate response. What would be a proportionate response? It's a question that's given me many hours of sleepless nights. What is a proportionate response in this asymmetric situation? It may well be that a proportionate response is commando operations. That may be, but that costs lives. And that's a question it's a political question that the Israeli government and the Israeli army would have to take. A proportionate response may well be, as Ambassador Gold, I think, certainly implied, would be to bomb the places where Israeli intelligence has information that rockets and ammunition are being stored. And if there's so-called collateral damage, I hate the expression collateral damage, it's much worse than that. One's talking about killing innocent civilians. If the cost is in killing innocent civilians, as long as it's proportionate to the military aim, it seems to me that would not be a war crime. But if it's disproportionate, and bombs and white phosphorus and flechettes are used, anti-personnel munitions that are designed to kill people and not to destroy buildings and not to destroy ammunition and rockets, that's disproportionate. So it's not something that we had to decide, fortunately. What we had to decide was what action was proportionate and what action was disproportionate.
I think that one of the central elements of our disagreement is how to treat the Hamas regime. You have a regime that has taken over the Gaza Strip. It evicted the Palestinian Authority, which previously ruled both Gaza and the West Bank. And the question is, what do? Do you relate and recognize it as the legitimate authority in the Gaza Strip? Or do you say, wait a minute, this organization is an international terrorist organization according to the United States, the European Union, Canada, and another group of countries. Now, in the case of Afghanistan, when the Taliban ruled Afghanistan completely back in 2001, and they gave sanctuary to an organization called Al-Qaeda that attacked this country, you reached a conclusion. And that conclusion was you had to take down the Taliban regime in Kabul. True, they ran to Pakistan, and they're coming back. But you set a principle that you can't allow terrorist regimes to give sanctuary to international terrorist organizations, which by definition attack innocent civilians and commit war crimes. So I think this is one of the central elements where we differ. I don't think you can create or treat the Hamas as a legitimate regime. And I think that Hamas is hosting and supporting terrorism of its own and terrorism of others is something which the report had to deal with. And I don't think you deal with that adequately when you just say armed groups, that innocuous comment that keeps repeating in the report ad infinitum.
I want to thank the students for their very thoughtful questions, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Professor Troen, to help close the evening.
we're going to move towards conclusion now. And we're going to give both Justice Goldstone and Ambassador Gold an opportunity for a very brief reflection before we wrap up. And we're going to go in the reverse order. First, Ambassador Gold.
I would like to bring my comments back to the organization that fostered, that gave life to this UN Gaza report, the United Nations. It's no secret that the UN Human Rights Council and that other bodies of the United Nations mistreat the state of Israel systematically. And the question that has to be asked by all of us when we look at the UN, and when the UN commissions a report of this sort, is what are the rights of a minority government? Meaning a government, a state, which is a minority in the international system, facing the tyranny of the majority repeatedly in the UN. That is the heart of the problem. And that is how the UN will be judged. The UN will not be judged on how the NAM movement, the non-aligned movement, votes together automatically on a whole assortment of issues, and how it defends the interests of the 130 countries that belong to the non-aligned movement. I think that was roughly the number when I served at the UN. It will be judged on how it treats minorities. The Jewish state is a minority in the international system. We do not have natural allies. We have the United States in the Security Council, but we do not have, we're not in a position where if we are assaulted, if we are mistreated systematically, that countries will circle the wagons to protect us. So you go after Luxembourg, the EU will protect you. You go after Singapore, ASEAN will protect you. You go after somebody in Africa, the African Union will sound off. You go after Sudan, we know who's going to protect you. But you go after Israel in the General Assembly or the Human Rights Council, no one is there to protect us. And that is good enough reason for the state of Israel to not cooperate with an investigation of this sort. And finally, it's good enough reason to leave the investigation of what is a just war in the hands of those we trust. Not just the Israeli military justice system, but the Israeli civilian justice system. The Attorney General and the Israeli Supreme Court, who I have complete faith in would get to the bottom of any war crimes, alleged war crimes, that are related to this conflict. Thank you.
I didn't intend to talk again about the United Nations, but I must respond to Ambassador Gold's point. If Israel, because of its isolation, it seems to me would have been well advised, and I think there are many in Israel, including Minister Herzog, there are many in Israel who would advise the government precisely for that reason to cooperate with an even-handed mandate and to take the moral high ground and to use it as the beginning and insisting that this was a new beginning for the Human Rights Council, treating Israel in an even-handed fashion. And it's had that effect indirectly, because the resolution adopting the report, as I said earlier, includes the report's very serious findings against Hamas and the other militant Palestinian groups, as we've called them. I just want to make a couple of very short points. Firstly, I question the statement made by Ambassador Gold that our report has been condemned by all spectrums in Israeli society. That's not my impression. If one reads all of the Israeli media, as I've been trying to do to the best of my ability, and if I interpret some of the emails I receive from people I've never heard of in Israel, there are many people there who don't accept that the policy was an appropriate one with regard to Operation Cast Lead. Secondly, breaking the silence used by Ambassador Gold. What he hasn't explained is why the Israeli government publicly made overtures to the United Kingdom and Dutch governments to stop giving financial support to that organisation and threatening legislation to stop human rights organizations in Israel receiving foreign funding. And it's certainly something that we report in our Gaza report, because this arose directly out of Operation QandA. Finally, the need for an investigation. I still hope, against all the odds and against the strong objections of Defense Minister Barak, I still hope that there will be an open investigation and not in darkness the military investigating itself. May I end with thanking Brandeis University so much for having given both Ambassador Gold and me this opportunity this afternoon. Brandeis really has lived up to its reputation of seeking the truth. And I think we can all, and I certainly feel very proud to have to be associated with Brandeis University, and to thank you all for your attention, for your politeness, and your willingness to hear views that must be anathema to one side or the other. Thank you very much.